Hi, Rachel.
Hi, Stuart. Really good to see you.
Good to see you.
Thank you so much for coming today.
Pleasure. Lovely to meet you.
So I'm delighted to be joined by you, Stuart Rose. Thank you for joining us today. So obviously your career has spanned right through from being a research scientist through to big pharma to biotech startups. So you really will have a 360 view of the sector. So before we dive into some of the big topics, it'd be great to hear from you in terms of your history and how you kind of got to being where you are now.
The history seems to go back a long way, because it does go back a long way. And started off as a scientist in university. I think what I understood then was the bench was not for me from a career perspective. It was fascinating in terms of creating a foundation of scientific understanding. But I then went into the pharmaceutical industry and spent many years learning mainly commercial roles in a variety of organisations. And it was those smaller ones which I really felt most at home in, because of your ability to create something that can actually make a change. And I think that's ultimately what drew me to the role. And it's an opportunity to really sort of put something back. As a not-for-profit, our purpose is to really focus on catalysing success in life sciences. And we're acutely focused on really helping to support those really small, emerging and growing life sciences companies to survive and then thrive in the ecosystem. It's great fun, but it's also a bit of a privilege to be able to put something back into the industry that's been so good to me for 40 years. So we broadly say we seek to promise to do three things. One is to help create connections. Two is to help young organisations save time and money. And three is to help them to secure investment. So the first one around connections is thousands of people sort of come through the door at our events, and they are designed to bring people together. Saving time and money is really two parts. The time bit is all around education, so skills and knowledge to allow senior executives who are relatively new in many cases in leadership to make good decisions quickly. And then saving money is we do a purchasing consortium that saves about half of lab costs if you're running a wet lab. And then finally, and particularly in today's climate of life sciences in the UK, is raising capital, securing investment. It's very tough. It is very tough for micro companies to actually raise, cash. But we do all that we can to actually facilitate that process through particularly events that bring together investors who are actively investing in UK life sciences and the brilliant companies that are spinning out amazing technologies that have something really good to offer, and bring them together so that that magic can happen.
What, from your perspective, has helped the growth of the UK life sciences ecosystem?
So I'd say probably the one that stands out and is most enduring is the UK holds 4 of the world's 10 best universities. And yet our population is just 0.8% of the global population. So we punch above our weight, and that's a great and immense latent power that the UK has. And that positions us really, really well. I think secondly is COVID sort of did help us. It helped life sciences because it actually led to that huge surge in investment in late 20 and 2021, because the world thought, actually, it's really easy to create a vaccine. Look at what happened with the Oxford AZ vaccine. It took 9 months to come. Of course, it didn't. That was the end of 20 years of immense and very timely, high-quality research. And so that helped attract money into the life sciences arena. What we saw was the power of collaboration was immense, because we saw previously competing pharmaceutical companies offering their manufacturing facilities to fast track the production for vaccines, etc. And I think that was a really good, from a human point of view, a really good demonstration of the power of collaboration. And then probably the third thing is it's a bit of a Brit thing. It's our resilience as a nation. When our backs are against the wall, our ability to be resilient, survive and innovate, I think is a really, really impressive trait that we have as a nation. And I think what we've seen for the last 2 years, which it has been really, really tough, is that it has not led to a deficiency in terms of brilliant innovation. In fact, that tough environment has forced the brilliant scientists of the UK to actually be even more inventive.
Absolutely. Is there any sense that the government and kind of legislation or incentives have really helped the industry from your perspective?
The industrial strategy, which came out in the summer, was, I think, really important because that set out the government's 8 focus areas for growth. Life sciences explicitly was one of those. High-tech manufacturing was another. So it appears that in the government's eyes, life sciences as a sector is absolutely fundamental to growth opportunities.
What would you say about the kind of talent base here, the sort of research base? What makes it a strength of the UK?
Our education base is really, really strong. The scientists that come out of that and ultimately spin companies out are amongst some of the best in the world. What we mustn't be is complacent that actually the UK is universally the best place to be, because sometimes the grass can appear greener to candidates from maybe potentially going over to the US. But the UK, for all of our faults, has an awful lot that is hugely attractive to individuals and their families. The culture that we have, I think, is a huge asset to the UK, and therefore that acts as an attractant to talent and a retainer of talent.
So then, I guess on the flip side, what do you see are the biggest challenges or barriers that these UK life sciences companies are facing?
We've had a lot of global uncertainty, and of course business leaders can't plan and certainly won't execute at times of high uncertainty. So that's been sort of very, very difficult. Only the very best will survive. Now, that's a brutal environment, but of course, if you're a Darwinist, and I am, it's actually pretty good for your gene pool, because what it does is it concentrates capability and the resilience and the ultimately commercial viability of the ideas that are coming out of universities and hospitals to be the very best in the world, not just in the UK, but I mean really world beating. So that sort of double-edged sword in terms of that Darwinian brutality can actually be better ultimately for the health of the UK life sciences sector.
You know, if we can look at the other things that the government has done in the sense of providing funding through grants, Innovate UK funding, things, those types of things can help. But ultimately, there are still these companies that are kind of saying, look, I'm working towards going to pitch to investors and I don't even know if I'm going to get any traction. Is there anything we can do to help that? And also, I think a lot of them are saying, well, do I need to go to the US? You know, there's a lot of companies that are kind of looking to the US thinking, oh, should I set up operations in the US? Will that make me more attractive to US investors? Obviously, that's not great for the UK.
The funding environment, particularly the last 2 years, has been tough. I mean, someone has described it as a nuclear winter. Public markets, of course, have been completely dead. But the private markets, there is actually increasing activity in there. And there is a perception that there will be money starting to flow. So there are some mechanisms to support that. One is the reduction in interest rates makes it easier. Part of the challenge is that the venture capital funds have not been able to get exits, so they haven't seen their money returned to reinvest in smaller companies. So what the VCs have typically been doing is following on their existing companies. As there is more good news starting to come, then that frees the space up for the VC money to start to go towards the newer companies. So there's a lot of heavy lifting going on behind the scenes and with government support to try and make it easier for small businesses. And in fact, the government has launched through the budget exercise a call for evidence from the perspective of entrepreneurs to see what is going to make their life easier and the UK more attractive from a tax perspective for those young companies. If you wind the clock back 2 or 3 years, shortage of lab space was a real issue. And of course, what they did was they spotted an unmet need, i.e. more lab space is required, and in parallel, a lot of building started. So with more lab space on the market in Golden Triangle and nationwide, what you've got now is a very well supplied market with a high degree of competition. And as the cash starts to flow through investment coming back into these small companies, I think they will get great top quality facilities at pretty good and competitive prices.
That's a really positive outlet. That's great to hear. Thank you for that. I know for one in Cambridge where they've been looking to convert places like the shopping centres that aren't kind of being used so much into lab space. So
Grafton Centre.
Yeah, exactly. I guess your vision for the next 5 years, what changes or key improvements would you like to see?
Pension funds, without a doubt, adding more cash into the system. But there's a trend at the moment to do what's called consensus investing, which is everybody sort of follows the herd. Okay, let's we'll only do late stage if you've got clinical data. How do you get clinical data? Oh, you need to do the clinical studies. How do you do the clinical studies? Well, you've got to get some VC investment. Well, you can't get that VC investment until you've got the data in, and it's a bit of chicken and egg. I think we've got an opportunity where the more courageous, and this is a little bit of a gauntlet down to the VC community, the more courageous investors will follow the science and the biology, not just the herd of consensus investing in later stage companies, and take some punts on some early stuff. You might be backing the only player in that technology, which means in 3 to 5 years' time, when it starts to reach inflection points of value, there isn't the competition, which means that the inflection point value return could be that much higher. So I think for these small companies to survive, to then be able to thrive, they need that pre-seed money, and getting facilities to actually support that. Grants are fabulous because they're obviously non-dilutive, but more VCs to actually go through the process of being a little bit more courageous with some of the smaller amounts that they might actually be able to invest. So all of my vision is around what can we do to support mechanistically and sentimentally the flow of cash into the early life sciences ecosystem, because life sciences is a jewel in the crown of the UK, and that's a jewel that really needs to be nourished.
A strong message, I think, for the market, and I think a lot of smaller companies would thank you for that kind of perspective, and hopefully that will spark further discussion on how we can support the ecosystem. But thank you very much for your time today.
Well, thank you. And above all, I'd say one message I can leave you with is it's an industry we should be enormously proud of, and I'm very optimistic for the future.